quite a lot. When questions are asked, we do genuine research and try to find relevant information. In this particular lecture, I would like to share with you information about caste, something which has bothered Indian society for a very long time. Caste is something that we know that it is something very reprehensible. It enforces disabilities on our society. It is something which should not happen, and yet it remains there. We are also familiar with condemnations of the caste from a very, very long time. One of the earliest condemnations of caste was in the time of Gautam Buddha, and since then people have been continuously saying, so remember, the anti-caste movement is not something new. The anti-caste movement has a very, very long standing. So now here we have a situation in which there is a social idea that has been condemned so many times, and yet we have this social idea coming up again and again in a wide variety of forms and continuing to be with us. So how does one make sense of all this and what to do about it? The one serious effort that had been made against caste was the Constitution of India, which provided a framework for Indians of contemporary times to break away from caste altogether. Caste also was something which contemporary social reformers railed against. At least I know of the magazine Sarika. It used to be a Hindi magazine which had an offer that matrimonial advertisements which did not mention caste, they would be carried free of charge. We know that all these things against caste have been said off and on. We also have examples of politics being created around caste in order to destroy caste and dissolve caste, political movements which are very strong and powerful, and these are very important for us. The disapproval of the caste system and whatever caste stands for has had a long standing. In this whole thing, perhaps the only person who has made an effort to institutionalize actions which destroy and dissolve caste, to my mind at least, the only person to have done that in a big way was Guru Nanak. Perhaps later on a suggestion would be made by Baba Sahib Ambedkar in 1936-37. We'll come to that suggestion in a moment. But Guru Nanak, by ensuring that everyone had entry to the Gurusal, the thing which ended up being called the Gurdwara, everyone, irrespective of caste, can enter the Gurdwara, and everyone sits down on the same table, on the same pangat, and eats food together, destroying the boundary of food and religion. That was perhaps before the Constitution of India, perhaps the only institutional effort to break caste. Today, the Constitution of India says that the caste system cannot exist anymore, and it allows us the ability to hit out at those who are trying to recreate the system of caste and the kind of disabilities that caste creates. Those who are supporting those disabilities are then disempowered. The earliest text that we have about which people have talked again and again, the Gita, that also talks about the caste in a little way. We'll talk about the Gita later on. The first thing, of course, to remember is the Purush Sukta, from which all the justification for the caste hierarchy comes up. The Purush Sukta in the Rig Veda, which says that the Brahmins come from the head of the mouth or head of the god, the Kshatriyas from the arm, the Vaishyas from the third, and the Shudras from the legs. That standard story is actually slightly complicated. And the complication comes from the fact that the Purush Sukta is about the Adi Purush. It is in a celebration of the Adi Purush. It is not a statement about how your world exists and how you came into being. There's a difference between how you came into being and how the Adi Purush exists. And the Purush Sukta is about that Adi Purush. And it has been repeated again and again in various texts. So it was, in those times at least, it was a popular text. So if it was a popular text, then what is this Adi Purush, this cosmic being? What does this cosmic being do, and how to make sense of this cosmic being and his existence? The details are about, from this cosmic being emerged the universe and the various parts of the universe. So depending on the details that you want to go into, I'll just skip this particular portion. The basic thing was everything in the universe, starting from the trees, from animals, from the sitaras, to the moon, to the sun, everything is emerged from the Purush in some form, and all that is repeated over there. And then comes the portion in which they talk about how human beings came into existence. How human beings came into existence is but a small portion of it, and as time passes and as the Purush Sukta and the Vedic knowledge becomes a secondary and then finally simply fades away into oblivion, The one small thing which the Brahmins remember, Purusha Sukta is only remembered by the Brahmins, is the Purusha Sukta. And in the Purusha Sukta, only that small portion which says, Brahman Devta to itne mahan hote hain. थोड़ा सा self-serving statement लगता है कि Brahmins are narrating a statement to justify their own greatness to the rest of the country, considering that no one really cares for them one way or the other. This is a kind of text, a statement of fact. This is a kind of text, the Purusha Sukta, which is not even an instructional text. It is just an invocative text. So my submission is that we need to know all these details in order to make sense of all those texts of history, literature, and ideology that have come up in India, which explain how Indian caste system came into being. My submission, that is not India's caste system. Purusha Sukta is not India's caste system. It's not Vyavastha in India. Whatever else it may be, that is a different thing. Coming to contemporary times. In contemporary times, we have had this great problem. Because the division on the basis of caste in India was used by the colonial British to explain how divided Indians were. They had already used religion as a basis to divide Indians. They had used language as a basis to divide Indians. And now they were using caste as a basis to divide Indians. And by constantly saying कि ये जाति प्रथा कास्ट सिस्टम जो आपका है इससे आप लोग सब डिवाइडेड और इसको आपको सब इकट्ठा करने का काम तो केवल अंग्रेज सरकार करती है अंग्रेज भाई बाप सर्वोपरि होता है इसीलिए this in turn evoked a large amount of reverse reaction. Even people like Gandhi got up and said, no, there's a lot of greatness in the caste system. Gandhi sits down and writes detailed notes and publishes them in his newspapers through the 1920s on the greatness of the caste system. 1920s, Gandhi is writing and justifying the greatness of the caste system. What we need to remember, however, is that in 1917, 1915 and 1916, Gandhi is fighting the caste system when he comes to Ahmedabad and he insists that this Dalit Parivar comes and stays in the ashram as a normal inmate. His wife and all his other friends in the ashram, they insist that this is a bad thing, it should not happen. And Gandhi says, no, it doesn't matter. Gandhi goes on a hunger strike, forces his wife and forces his friends to accept his decision that the Dalit Dalit Parivar will be staying with them. And then the people of Ahmedabad get up and say, we won't allow you to exist over here. And so when the people of Ahmedabad get up and tell Gandhi that we won't allow you to exist over here, Gandhi ups his ashram. He doesn't change his decision. He ups his ashram, goes across the river. The Sabarmati and what he sets up as, now today we know as the Sabarmati ashram, it is set up over there. We know that Gandhi is hostile to the caste system. And yet, soon after the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi sits down and pens detailed notes on the greatness of the caste system. How do you make sense of that transformation? The only thing that you can perhaps say is that here was a man who was trying to tell the British, or at least he was trying to convince himself. Yeah.
So basically, Gandhiji was against the evil of caste system, that's untouchability. But as such, the caste system he believed was of divine origin. And till the end of his life, he didn't.
Keep that point pending for a moment. Because as I told you about the Purusha Sukta, I would say the same about Gandhi, that he's not making instructional statements. In the absence of any better understanding of those times, he's making some suggestions. What he's saying is essentially these hierarchies don't matter. And in the 1920s, there's a unique situation in which he's actually, remember, he's lost the battle in 1922 when the non-cooperation movement had to be withdrawn. He needs to boost up his morale a little bit. And this is his morale boosting exercise. Caste is such a great thing. I'm part of this whole tradition of caste. I am a Banya. How does it matter? I don't believe in discrimination. These are standard statements which close to anyone who is not evil give, because they believe in the caste system. They are not evil, so they disagree with the disabilities that the caste system keeps, and then this is the statement that is made. It's a standard statement. What we do have is that there's another bunch of people, small in number at the moment, who say that the caste system is bad, who say what we would today call, who battle against the caste system. And one such person is Baba Saheb Ambedkar. The big clash between Ambedkar and Gandhi happens during the roundtable conference, which ends up with the Pune Pact. And in this big conflict, Ambedkar's big question is, okay, Gandhi says precisely the point that you are making. And Ambedkar says, so what's so great about all this that you are saying? This is a very evil system and it should be rooted out, and the only way to root it out is to settle it in the constitution in this fashion. And my suspicion is that among the discussions that happened, Gandhi's already gone on a hunger strike saying कि Ambedkar जी यदि मेरी बात नहीं मानेंगे तो मैं खाना नहीं खाऊंगा. And Ambedkar is on record saying कि ये मर गया तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? It is Ambedkar and Gandhi when they come together and they start talking. That Ambedkar comes out and he says, okay, I back off. Then you have the next public statement coming up from Gandhi who says, and I transformed myself entirely. After that, he stops talking about the caste system. Through his life, he doesn't say much on the caste system. What he does is, he transforms the name of his newspaper. He starts insisting that he will be talking to the Dalits and living with them all the time. He makes a very outward effort, a symbolic effort to reach out. And what is the thing which, yeah?
Don't you think that's got to do with politics rather than senior?
Could be. Entirely it could be. It's entirely possible. I'm not discounting that thing. What I'm also saying is that if it was possible for him to change his views so easily, that the views held earlier were not so powerful.
Because there's an entire school of thought, inspired probably by Arun Shoury's book Ocean of False Gods, which believe that Ambedkar was actually a collaborationist. There's a whole school of thought which
that's entirely possible. Within India, people were constantly collaborating, compromising, fighting. This was a routine process. Gandhi collaborates so frequently, Nehru collaborates so often. The only person who doesn't collaborate is Bhagat Singh. But then Bhagat Singh existed only for 3-4 years in public life. Had he existed for 25 years, chances are he would also have ended up doing that, because that is the normal Indian way of doing things. The point is this, that Gandhi asks Ambedkar, do you believe in the eradication of caste? And Ambedkar says, yes, that is my final goal. And Gandhi says, do you think that by institutionalizing it in the constitution, it is ever going to go away? And Ambedkar says, I don't have an answer to that question. Ambedkar doesn't give an answer. He simply says, I don't have an answer to that question. And he comes out and he says, fair enough, I'm backing off. This man may die, people will feel upset. I can't bear that kind of pressure on me. Ambedkar doesn't compromise on Gandhi's well-being. He compromises on his ideas, and he goes in for what is known as the Pune Pact. Now, this kind of a thing is when we keep all this in mind, and we go back and think about what is the caste system and how the caste system functions. We notice that the caste system talks about eating rules, marriage rules, and the idea of purity and pollution. Now, all these rules are completely changeable, completely mutable, completely like you can break the rule, pay a fine, everything is compoundable, pay a fine to the leaders of your community, and you're back into the system. So it's not as if you can break these rules and get away altogether. Purity and pollution, of course, is something which is not very firm, which is very firmly grounded. There's no particular scale of what is pure and what is impure. And one of the interesting things that happens over here is that almost everyone seems to believe that almost everyone else is less pure than they are. Everyone else is more impure. Ambedkar notices this in a big way. And Ambedkar at one point writes that all Indians are tied to each other, are bound to each other by caste. And through caste, they are bound to each other by mutual threads of mutual contempt. Indians relate to each other with contempt. M.N. Srinivas comes in many years later to examine the caste system, and M.N. Srinivas puts this idea to test. And he asks people, so give me a list of castes which are above you and give me a list of castes which are below you. And almost everyone names 1 or 2 castes above them, and the rest of all the other castes in the community is below them. Now, if everyone lists everyone else is below them, then there's a problem coming up. हर कोई हर किसी के प्रति बड़े हिकारत का भाव रखता है. They think very low of all other people around them. Now, this kind of a social identifier flummoxes people in a big way. How does this come about? What it is all about? This starts with the Portuguese. The word caste. सबसे पहली चीज कि caste did not exist in India before the Portuguese started identifying it. The Portuguese identified, used the word caste. Before that, the term that was in use was jati. It was a much more flexible kind of a term. The Portuguese used this word. The English used this word to identify India using the European tradition. And in this system of identifiers, they use color, they use the shape of the nose, the shape of the lips, whatever the standard ways of identifying different people of those times were, they are put into use. The one thing, of course, is that everyone seems to suggest that they are superior to everyone else. So in the case of color, those who are darker in color are supposed to be slightly inferior to those who are brighter in color. Of course, all this remains valuable till such time that the Angrez comes, and it turns out that the Angrez is fairest of all. सबसे घटिया किस्म का भी अंग्रेज था, सबसे नीची जाति का भी जो अंग्रेज था, वो भी बाकी सबसे सुंदर दिख रहा था क्योंकि उसका रंग सफेद था. ये तो बड़ी क्राइसिस क्रिएट करता है लोगों के लिए. बहरहाल, the point is this kind of a rather amorphous weird system that India was working with, this kind of an amorphous weird system finds its justification in a wide variety of ways. One of the places where it finds its justification is in the Bhagavad Gita. When we look at the Bhagavad Gita, what does it say? The Bhagavad Gita essentially says two things. At step one, it lists out what the castes are and what is the essential duty of the different castes. In this point, it is essentially repeating whatever else it has been talking about, whatever else is the normal understanding of caste in those days. The second thing that it talks about is the commitment to work. Yeah. Yeah.
So in one of the slides you had mentioned that honor killings are tribal in nature.
Yeah.
So what do you want to convey by that?
Honor killings are not killings which are done by non-tribal groups. Non-tribal groups compound offences and say कि यदि dishonor हो गया तो थोड़ा पैसा इधर उधर कर दो तो ठीक हो जाएगा सब कुछ. It's in the smaller pockets coming from Afghanistan, coming from occupied tribal land. Okay, tribal is not what you have in Jharkhand and Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. Tribal is what you have in Punjab, Haryana, and up in the northwest. So I should make that small clarification over there. Because over there, honor is deemed to be answered only in blood and nothing else. So that's a small package. Perhaps that is also the tradition which then migrates into Kathiawar, because in Kathiawar also a similar thing exists. But it doesn't exist in the rest of the country. So either the word tribal goes or whatever, but the change needs to be made. Thanks.
But during intercaste marriages, even then honor killings are done. So
That is a rather recent phenomenon, and people have a tendency, once the signifiers come up, then people have a tendency, जब मारुति 800 आई थी तो हर कोई मारुति 800 ये खरीद रहा था इसलिए कि इससे हमारी समाज की वैल्यू बढ़ती है, हमारा ऑनर बढ़ता है. So that's something like that. And this is a society which doesn't care for its women. So it's easy to kill women, and it's also a society in which where there's very little other rules and regulations going on. You can get away with it as a possibility. We have examples of people who are from the completely lower caste otherwise involved in higher honor killing because their daughter married someone from an upper caste. So it's a complicated thing, and life is complicated. It needs to be taken care of that. Yeah? But the thing about the Gita, if I come back to the Gita, on the one side, the Gita says things like it makes a standard repetition of whatever caste is supposed to be. But on the other side, it also keeps on insisting that you should keep on doing the work that was assigned to the work. So wherever you are located, the work that has been assigned to you, please do the work properly. Please do the work with great work, and don't feel upset about doing the work. Don't feel upset that you have been asked to do that particular task. If you remember the lecture yesterday, Anil Sinha's lecture, a person who's working in a very difficult situation also says the same thing. Now you're landed with this task, you might as well do it well. Don't crib about it. Don't say that this is bad. Don't feel bad about it. Just put in your best. Now this is a kind of general philosophical lesson to my mind at least, the Gita repeats in a big way. It says that there's no work which is inferior. There is no work which is unnatural. Every work is good for you. You should just go ahead and do this kind of work. Yeah.
Sir, isn't this a very convenient, manipulative kind of way to justify and give religious sanction to the caste system and justify?
We'll come to that in a moment. Keep that pending. The Gita is not saying that the caste system is good. All that it is saying is it repeats the Purush Sukta kind of thing in a different language, and then it says, जो भी आपको काम मिला वो करना चाहिए. Whether the Gita was a religious text of how much value it was, etc. This is, today we know that it's of high value for Indian society. Was it of given the similar value in earlier times? That is a slightly open-ended kind of a thing. Anyway, the point is that we have yet another set of descriptions coming up about the caste system with the Babarnama and Babar coming in. Babar is writing the Babarnama in the Turki language, which is to the people of those times, it is a secret language. Secret language because his friends and followers don't understand Turki. They work in Farsi, or they work in Afghani, or they work in Urdu. They don't work in Turki. Turki is a language which is known to Babar and just a handful of other people. So he's writing his diaries, which are very open kind of diaries. And in these diaries, simply pouring his heart out about what he's experiencing in the world. And part of it that he writes is, this king, the land beyond Hindu Kush in the east of the Sindh is Hindustan. He says that he's going to the countries of Hindustan when he marches out of Kabul. And then when he crosses the river, he says, once you're in Hindustan, everything is in the Hindustani way. The trees, the rocks, the land, people, opinion, customs, everything is different from what you have otherwise. And then he talks about the people. People are stubborn, the people are rebellious, the people are bad, the people are not very likable. The people are extremely mobile. The hamlets and villages and towns are set up in a moment, and hamlets, villages and towns are removed in a moment. People simply don't have roots anywhere. This is unlike people of Samarkand, or people of Kabul, or people of the other places that Babur has been to. It's a country which has, yeah.
Sir, I have read Babur Nama. Babur was betrayed Babur were from Samarkand against the battle of Muhammad Shahbaz Ghani, I think. People who betrayed him were from.
But he's not saying bad things about them. He's saying bad things about the people who live here.
He represented as a ruler of Afghanistan rather than that of.
Life is complicated.
No. Why do you want to call him a ruler of Afghanistan? You know, he's a thing. Okay,
सिर्फ टाइटल पढ़ा है
okay, then you have to read Babur Nama.
सब बिब्लियोग्राफी पढ़ा है
His perception about India was based on the Afghanistan. He was born in
ए पांडे जी आप वीपी पे पढ़े थे
Just a second.
compared with three countries.
No, but he's been in touch with China. The Mughal soldiers are coming from China. His mama is the one who's sending him the soldiers. He's in touch with the Parsis. Iran on the other side. He's a cosmopolitan kind of character. And as a cosmopolitan character who has been in Afghanistan for 20 years and who has only written praises of Afghanistan, as soon as he comes to Hindustan, he has
But the real good thing about India is that he has not seen a beautiful building such as Gwalior Fort.
we'll come to that in a second.
इसकी पूरी का
I'm
इंटरव्यू तो देखेंगे
not
पांडे
talking about the beautiful
और
things.
पांडे जी ना अपने इंटरव्यू के लिए बहुत मेहनत की
Yeah.
ये दिख रहा है सब कुछ इनका ग्वालियर है
Sir, he is talking about the numberless workmen and the skill that they have. That's the beautiful building part. He's saying that these guys are skilled, but these guys are bad. And he's saying that you can construct in India very well, which you can't do anywhere else. But about the people, he's very, very clear. Ill-mannered, obnoxious, bad people, no social niceties, never interact with anyone else. What was he referring to? How could he have experienced all these badnesses from the people of India? Either his sipahis were not getting the due respect from the public, they were not being welcomed anywhere else. Either where he goes, you can see that there's fear, but there's a lot of distance between him and everyone else. Whatever the case may be, the basic thing is that he notices that these are guys who don't interact with outsiders like easily. This kind of complaints we notice when the British start writing about their experiences in India in the time of Jahangir and much later in the time of the 19th century. We have virtually a repeat description of whatever Babur is saying about the society of the people of India. Babur says these are uncultured people, they live in forests, they are uncivilized, the artisans and craftsmen have their own tribes. The Englishmen make these complaints, a similar set of complaints. The one or different version of Indian society that we have comes from Karnataka, where Abbe Dubois is roaming around. He's come at a time when France is in great turmoil as a consequence of the revolution. And Dubois notices the structure of Indian society. And here he talks about the big caste system being the basis of Indian society. And he says that the people of India live in tribes. Tribes are called castes. In a single district, there can be 4 tribes living: the Dayars, the Kurds, the Tudus, and the Canaries, each with many sub-tribes, different language, customs, spirit, and character. This is the standard description that has been given again and again by various other people also. He says that the immigrants carry their own customs and language and do not intermingle with anyone else. And one of the key statements that he makes, to my mind at least, is that everyone is allowed to coexist as long as they follow local decorum. So long as you don't go and tread on the toes of the people with whom you're living, you're allowed to do whatever you feel like doing, maintain your systems and maintain your customs. And he talks about the Varna system, and he says, वैसे तो कहा जाता है कि there's a Varna system, but really no one follows it properly. Seldom are the kings, the Kshatriyas, very few of the Brahmins are learned. Now if he's talking about this in Karnataka, then this is a serious statement. The Brahmins of the north may not be very learned, but the South Indians are the learned kinds. And he says very few Brahmins are learned. All castes wear arms. This is a normal and routine observation that many other outsiders would also make, that everyone is a weapon holder. The Maratha army has many Brahmin soldiers, and all Indians that he says are undisciplined both in their civil life and in their warfare. It's a simple, great chaos. The big thing is that Dubois says कि बड़ा chaotic सा system है and now I need to make sense of it. How does he make sense of it? He sits down with a bunch of Brahmins and asks them to explain what the caste system is. As soon as he sits down with a bunch of Brahmins to explain the caste system, they explain to him ये पुरुष डूबता था, ये गीता में कहा गया था, ये इस तरह से था. That standard formulaic structure of caste system with which we are familiar today, that is told to him. We will also notice that this is approximately the same kind of thing which happens when Warren Hastings makes his first effort to understand Indian society. How to make sense of this complexity of Indian society? You can understand the society by its jnanis, ask them to tell you what the society is. He catches hold of a number of Maulvis and a number of Brahmins from Varanasi, and he asks them to sit down and write these texts for the benefit of the officers of the East India Company. As these texts are written, these texts essentially are what we today call the high tradition of these two cultures, the Islamic culture and the Hindu culture. उसमें किस तरह का समाज चलता है, कैसे चलता है, ये सारा कुछ वहाँ पहली मर्तबा बड़ी seriously लिखा जाता है. And it is at that point that you start having this notion that caste is the central defining feature of Indian society. And the English then start pushing it forward in a manner that after some time it starts acquiring a political color. As it acquires a political color, we've already seen the story of Gandhi, how Indians are faced with this great difficulty. On the one side, people are using the caste system as a device to humiliate Indian society. Look here, your society is so unforgiving, so disruptive, so inhumane. This is the kind of statement that is being made by the critics of Indian society. On the other side, those who are trying to say that Indian society is a great society, they are faced with this problem that they need to make statements about how great Indian society was, and every time they make a statement about how great Indian society is, a counter-example or a counter-statement is made, which basically is about how bad they really are. This continues till such time that in the 1960s, when democracy begins to spread all over India, caste begins to acquire a political tinge. The people of India, the Gyanis of India don't seem to realize it. The politicians seem to realize it. And one of the first persons, an observer of India, student of India, who notices that caste has acquired a political tenor is Rajni Kothari, who sits down and examines the voting patterns of the 1960s, and he writes a small article in the Economic and Political Weekly in which he talks about caste in Indian politics. Later on, this grows into being a small book, which is one of the most path-breaking books of Indian politics, how caste is used in Indian politics. Subsequently, the use of caste in Indian politics comes out more and more, till such time that we come to a point where Kashiram comes up, and Kashiram very openly and clearly and in an in-your-face kind of a manner, in a completely in-your-face kind of a manner, Kashiram takes hold of the caste system and he raises the slogan, Tilak, Tarazu और तलवार इनको मारो जूते चार. अभी तक लोगों ने एंटी कास्ट बातें करी थी, अभी तक लोगों ने कास्ट के बारे में कुछ अच्छा बोला था, कुछ बुरा बोला था, पर इतनी साफ गोई से, with such clarity and such blatancy, no one had said that the caste system can be used in this manner. Kashiram creates a problem for everyone else. The existing polity of India is not able to make sense of it. Kashiram says, people say you can't win elections by this. Kashiram says, I don't want to win an election. All that I want to do is make you lose the election. So if the Congress is going to win, the Congress guy is going to lose. If the Bhajapa is going to win, the Bhajapa guy is going to lose. If the SP guy is going to win, he is going to lose. Kashiram says that all that I want to do is make you lose. And this strategy, almost a reverse kind of a strategy, becomes so powerful that in the next 5 years, the rest of the country is forced to set up and make new sense of this way of using caste in politics. We have a complicated system coming up. We have a complicated system which has got all these values, but where exactly would it lead us to, and how to resolve this issue of caste? Is it something which is so deeply embedded in it that it cannot be rid? Is it something which is completely mobile and motile and it really doesn't matter? If it doesn't matter, then why is it that it continues to the shadow ki taur pe chhaya rehta hai over the rest of the society? That is something which is still open for us to think about and find answers to. At this point, I will be quiet and wait for your questions, comments. Yeah.
Sir,
Yeah.
Isn't it better Isn't a better way to study caste is how it exists in society and how it has existed in society, rather than studying what is written in Rig Veda or Gita?
Absolutely. There have been very few studies of this variety, and it is only now that some people have started studying them. One of my students who was teaching in a school, a high school, he was a high school teacher and a Christian, he left his job because he was very deeply moved by this particular question. And he's studying how did the Valmiki caste come about. And he's coming up with all sorts of explanations. He was most upset because he's a Valmiki himself. He was most upset when people gave him stories which are contrary to what his knowledge was. So I had to convince him, look here, what you really have to do is you are a researcher. Those people are your informants. You have to wait and let them speak rather than trying to convert them to your way of thinking. Once that particular step was taken, then he was able to collect a large number of stories. Each story is completely different from the other story. There seems to be no commonality. The only commonality that seems to be is that at some point the Valmikis came into existence, or people who of the scavenging caste came into existence. And their role keeps on varying. Some people have studied the Chamars in this manner, going into and trying to study them. But we need a large number of people to be doing these studies at the moment, and that is yet missing. In the absence of field studies of that variety, we have to resort to textual studies still. What the thing is, now that we have some information coming from the field which says that this is all something which is completely mobile. For example, there was this case of, there's this boy who has crossed the border. He's an illegal migrant and he's not had food for some time. And then all of a sudden comes this municipal worker who says कि हम तेरे को खाना भी देंगे, हम तेरे को रहने को भी एक जगह दे देंगे, पर तेरे को basically ये करना पड़ेगा, you go into this sewer and clean it up. So he goes into the sewer and he cleans it up, and as he's doing all this, the Hindustan Times photographer arrives and the Hindustan Times photographer clicks it. And the photograph is absolutely fantastic. In this photograph, this young lad about 18, 19, he's smiling, and there's a smile which goes into your eyes and your face lights up. It is that smile. He's in the manhole, covered up till here with dirt, and he's smiling away. And the photographer explains. He says, I talked to him. I said, why are you so happy? He said, for the first time in so many years, someone has taken an interest in me. That makes me very happy. Remember, he's not from the scavenging caste. He has been pushed into this job because, well, he had nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, and here was someone who came with an offer for a job. The Indian Express sent its people to Bombay to ask the sewage workers of the Bombay Municipal Corporation, and they discovered that the sewer man of Bombay, BMC, is one of the most highly regarded young man in his community. सबसे पहले उसकी शादी होती है जिसको कि जमादार की नौकरी बीएमसी में मिली होती है। क्यों? क्योंकि शादी के लिए आपको एक खोली चाहिए होती है। The deal that the BMC offers is कि आपको एक खोली मिलेगी, नारीमन पॉइंट पे मिलेगी, कोलाबा में मिलेगी, आपको जो प्राइम लोकेशंस ऑफ मुंबई है वहां पे मिलेगी। The consequence is that this young man, जिसकी सबसे पहले शादी हुई है, he is able to, simply because of his work, he is able to leverage the rest of the family out. So some of the members of the family are working in the USA, some of them are doctors, many of them are businessmen. They are making big money and good money. The one thing that they do is while they thank the brother who got them these opportunities, they break away all social and cultural links with them. Now, the Indian Express documents it as saying, but now that a realization is coming in, that the work is not bad work. The society is bad which says that you have to do this work. This is something that we were talking about a while ago with some of the other friends, that in such work existed in Europe till the First World War. There were nightmen who were supposed to do the scavenging work. These nightmen were not supposed to be visible in society at all. So you came after 9 o'clock, and you went away to your home before 6 in the evening, before 6 in the morning. If you had been seen in society between these two during daytime, you would be punished severely. And their job was to remove this gandagi from the society and take it out and dump it somewhere outside. And they had a small hut near the gandagi where they used to live. Then the First World War came, there was a severe shortage of men. Men had to be pushed into the army and sent to Europe to get killed. Now you didn't have people to clean up things. So if you didn't have people to clean up things, what did you do? You started transforming your society. First you built up complicated sewerage systems which did not need human intervention. And once you did not need human intervention in that entire memory of nightmen existing in that society has vanished. What we need therefore is to notice how these transformations have taken place, not just in India, but also in other societies. Because otherwise, except for this great distancing between the untouchable and the touchable castes, the rest of the caste system seems to be extremely mixed up. Brahmins are doing businesses, skilled workers are performing the task of puja part. This is throughout history. Rohidas comes in, he's a leather worker. Rohidas comes in and the princess decides that she thinks that he's got great ideas and she should be with him. So the Rajput princess simply walks away with Rohidas. The family is most upset. But the rest of the society says, but you know, what's the point of being upset? She's such a great person, he's such a great person. The fact that they have moved away from the rest of Rajput society is a great thing. And we should go and worship them. Today, in the same society, the princess is worshipped with great worth. The society thinks highly of her. So remember, the caste per se is a completely, it's a completely fictitious thing. It is a thing, it is a device to, what he said over here, it is a device, ideological device to control people. It is a device to, it's a negative kind of a device. Time has come with the Constitution of India now available to us, with the new system of law and order available to us, to do away with these strategies. Maybe there was a time when caste was a great strategy for making sense of society. We don't know what that time was. What we do definitely know is, today that time is past. Today we cannot use caste as a manner, as a device for understanding society. It has served its purpose, it has passed its expiry date, and as an idea, organizing Indian society which is past its expiry date, it's best removed and the new kind of society can be formed. The problem, of course, is, once again going back into the history of the caste system, we think about criticisms of the caste system, we should remember that criticisms have been coming in for the last 2,500 years. So when we criticize the caste system, we are not the first set of people who are doing it. Guru Nanak was, to my mind, as I shared with you earlier, one of the first ones to institutionalize the removal of caste. And over there, as a consequence of which, within Sikhism, in Punjab, caste system exists in a small way, but it is not as vicious and as in your face as it exists in other parts of the country. Ambedkar came up with an answer also. An answer which never worked out in the long run, because Ambedkar removed his focus and he was not doing the same kind of action as Guru Nanak was doing. That answer was, here was a case in which the Arya Samajis had something called the Jat Paat Todak Mandal. The Jat Paat Todak Mandal, as a consequence of all the jagda that was going on in public against caste and religion, had decided to reform society and remove caste. So the Jat Paat Todak Mandal has its annual conference in Lahore, and they invite Ambedkar, who has just won a major victory against Gandhi, to come and address the conference as the president. Ambedkar has got complicated ideas in his mind. He's a very academically minded person, a very serious kind of a character. He wants people to understand what he's saying. It's a complicated argument that he wants to make, and he wants people to genuinely understand whatever he's saying. So Ambedkar sits down and he writes up his thoughts. He writes up his thoughts and he wants them to be published in a booklet and distributed to the audience, so that when he's reading out his lecture, people can follow it closely and keep understanding what Ambedkar really wants to say. And so he sends an advance copy to the organizers. As the advance copy reaches the organizers send him a telegram saying, "We have cancelled the conference, thank you very much for your ideas, this is not what we want." So what is so unique about these things? You go through that booklet, the booklet is now one of the most important booklets to be read if you want to understand the caste system and get out of it. In this, the booklet is titled Annihilation of Caste. Jat Paat Todak Mandal, annihilation. Ambedkar is actually doing the task that the Arya Samajis wanted. And Ambedkar in this book gives out the history of caste, the manner in which it has been used to oppress people, the kind of contradictions that exist within caste, the manner in which caste has actually really never been followed in society properly, except when you wanted to oppress someone, except when you wanted to justify the oppression that you were heaping on someone else, you really didn't bother about caste. And Ambedkar, after listing all these things are not things which the Arya Samajis are objecting to. What they object to is the small solution that Ambedkar offers. Ambedkar's solution is, what you really need to do is encourage inter-caste marriage. Not just inter-caste marriage, boys of the upper caste are marrying girls of the lower caste, but the boys of the lower caste are marrying girls of the lower caste. The R.S. Mataji said, no, here we stop. Ambedkar's booklet is never published. Ambedkar is not the kind of public figure who would be able to force his ideas forward. But we do know, the society forgets Ambedkar very quickly. And all that we do is we make that book out of him with the constitution, Parliament House ke samne jo laga hua tha, and by and large he has been forgotten. Till such time that in the 1970s, two men, young men working in Pune, one is D.K. Khaparde and one is Kashiram, they come together and they are most upset at the government of India removing Ambedkar's birthday as a national holiday. Why is Ambedkar's birthday removed as a national holiday? Because they want to put Lokmanya Tilak's birthday as a holiday. So they say, see, Lokmanya Tilak ke liye you can have a holiday, separate holiday, but don't remove Ambedkar. The government simply arrests both of them, they're put into jail for some time, their bosses do hi, how can you be a government servant and do all these things? So they sit down and they try to figure out what is the way out. And they create a small organization for themselves. This small organization then tries to do various things. It succeeds in some, most of it fails, till such time that in the 1980s, Kashiram says that all this talking, discussion, etc. doesn't work out. You should be in active politics if you want to do something about it. And he joins active politics, forms the BSP, and as soon as he forms the BSP and contests elections, everyone laughs at him and says, "Abhi to jeetega hi tu." वो जीतेगा तो नहीं, वो तो सही बात है. And then he does all that I talked to you about earlier. He comes forward and he says, my objective is not to win, my objective is to make you lose. And then he comes up with these some of the most aggressive statements on caste that we have heard in the recent past.
Sir,
Yeah.
2007 Uttar Pradesh legislative assembly elections, Dalits and Brahmins came together to vote for replacement. It was then touted as a great example of social engineering or political acumen. My question is, was it just sharp and smart political maneuver, or something in the last 2 to 5 decades has actually changed on the ground? And secondly, have the Dalits stopped voting as a bloc, and maybe that is the reason why the BSP is not that put into force in Uttar Pradesh as it was like, let's say, the late 90s? Sir.
Remember that in Punjab also the BSP split. Because in Punjab, the distance between the Dalits and non-Dalits is not very sharp. The distance is small, and there's a lot of give and take between everyone. So over there in that society, they have not succeeded. Rahi baat ye ki was it a smart political move to join hands with the Brahmins and go ahead with that? I mean, it's possible that it was a smart move, but I would ask a question in a different kind of a manner. What I would also want to know is how was it that all these Brahmins who have been completely casteist till just yesterday, how was it possible for them to so easily join hands on the other side? Now the only explanation possible is the kind of narrative that I have given you over here. That these boundaries did not matter in the first place. These are completely fictitious boundaries, made up boundaries which carry no value unless, when do they carry value? They carry value only on 2 occasions. One occasion when you want to make the other person look low, demonstrate that you are superior and the other set of people is below you. The second, it is of value only when you want to bully someone. So you want to bully someone, you use this as an excuse to go out and bully. If the other person is strong enough. Remember, Gandhiji goes abroad and Gandhiji has to come back and he has to do all that prashit, etc., etc. You're familiar with that particular story. But also remember that Gandhiji goes abroad so many times. Never again is he asked to do any prashit. So what were those guys doing when the first time he's a young student who has come back home? They're bullying him in a big way. That bullying today is not acceptable, and the Constitution of India allows us to know that people who are indulging in such bullying should be stopped. In Haryana, at least, I know that people have tried to bully the people lower down, weaker people, in the name of caste and inter-caste marriage and honor killing. So in the case of Haryana, the Punjab and Haryana High Court stepped in, and the Punjab and Haryana High Court forced the Huda government to take action against all such people. Today, the stories of honor killing from Haryana have all of a sudden stopped. It's not that the society has changed, it's just that the state authorities have said, "Panke log hamare saath, hum saza denge."
So one kind of argument is that school of thought is that the caste should not exist as such. Ambedkar even calls for an annihilation of the caste. Whereas other school of thought is that the discrimination among castes is the issue, the existence of caste itself is not an issue. For example, if a Kamma girl or a boy marries a Reddy girl in Andhra, it doesn't shock people so much. And even a Gaud marries a Yadav in Telangana, it does not, both are backward classes. In the previous case, both are forward classes, caste. So whereas, because socially they are equal. So do you think the goal should be to bring all the castes to equal status, or eradication of caste itself?
See, social discrimination and hoity-toityness is something which is almost impossible to eradicate unless you have a genuine transformation in society. One of the things which is a genuine transformation in society is that the society simply becomes rich once again. The society becomes more prosperous than it has been recently. And as the society prospers, it is accompanied by, prosperity can't be a standalone thing. The prosperous society accompanied by a strong enough state which ensures that those who are trying to bully someone else, remember, someone comes and bullies me, I don't have the wherewithal to fight that bully. It is the authorities of the state which should come and save me and protect me. The authorities of the state don't need to change my mindset or the other fellow's mindset. All that they need to tell the other guy, stop bullying. Itna sa yadi ho jata hai, it will be good enough. What we did was, remember our society was a prosperous society after 47. It was not a Garib Gurba society of the pre-47 variety. Prosperity increased all of a sudden. We also brought in the constitution. So as a consequence of which, things seemed to improve a little more, and the whole structure of the 1960s politics, in which all the Sharmas and the Chaubes and the Chaturvedis and the Jains ceased to be ministers and MLAs. If you look at the list of ministers and MLAs before 1967, it's all the upper caste Brahmins and Rajputs who are dominating that area. You look at the list after that, and all of a sudden there's a more democratic spread of ideas and people. Now that is a transformation that came in, but after that, because the state machinery never improved. I mean, we did pass laws, but we didn't empower the systems of governance to step in and guide people properly. So maybe that is something that is needed in the future. We have tried out things. We know about the Angrez. Wherever the Angrez wanted the government to step in and stop a riot or stop people fighting with each other, they always succeeded. The government of independent India, however, has been rather relaxed about it and allowed people to have their say and get away with things. That will have to stop. Much like it has happened in Europe. I give you the example of discrimination in Europe. Once the social structure, once the economic structure changed, once the prosperity level of that society changed, all those other discriminations simply vanished. The maid who would otherwise come and stand like this, offer a cup of tea to someone, that maid doesn't exist in Europe anymore. You want your chai, please go ahead and get your own chai. You want your boots polished, pick up a brush, pick up your boot polish and polish it yourself. No one is going to do it for you. The same happens in America, except in the California side, where you have a lot of Mexicans and other people coming in. उनसे फिर लोग इसी तरह का काम कराते हैं जैसे यहाँ पे हिंदुस्तान में कराते हैं. They say, but these are not our servants, these are our helpers. When those Hindustanis from California come to us and they say कि अरे तुम्हारे पास लोग काम करते हैं, हम कहते हैं देखो हमें बुद्धू मत बनाओ. We know कि तुम वहाँ पे ऐसे करते हो, तो यहाँ पे इस तरह का चल रहा है. The day people become prosperous enough and don't need to work in other people's homes, you will find a situation in which everyone starts doing their own work. In Gurgaon, people are already doing their own work. Delhi people are already doing their own work. Bombay people are already doing their own work. All this will happen. Manrega stepped in as a big transformation. Manrega came in and all of a sudden all these house servants and lower order workers vanished. Because now people who had Manrega jobs in their own district, they didn't want to come back to Punjab and Haryana. So that transformation we need. We need a transformation on the economic front. We need a transformation on the governance front. The social thinking and ideology will transform automatically. That's the crux of what I'm saying over here. That this social thinking about which we have thought that this is the basis of Indian society, perhaps it is not. Perhaps it is simply an explanation for justifying oppression of each other, in contempt for each other. That needs to be changed, and that is possible only through these two means. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me patiently. And may I once again repeat that those of you who are interested in keeping in touch, This is the